Good morning. Welcome to Sales Chatter, the logistics podcast, where we aim to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed. With me is my good friend, Dan Deigan. I see you got the Super Mario shirt on. Are you going to start singing
Yeah, but
Peaches? Have you seen the movie yet?
no. Have you?
No, not yet, but I've been seeing everything on TikTok. But I heard it's amazing, man. I heard it's a great movie, especially a lot of parents going and seeing with their kids. So you're kind of getting a two for one. So maybe we'll do sales chatter at the movies. Maybe you and I will go see a
Hey,
movie.
you know what, brother? That was one thing I loved when the kids were younger is going to see Shrek and stuff. And I had more fun than the kids watching Shrek and all that. And it's like, it is what a genius for them to start making movies where the parents aren't falling asleep in the movie theater and like we're getting certain jokes that the kids aren't getting. And it's like, yeah, man. Icon right here's an icon, right? Like, think about it. This is like I was a baby when this stuff started happening in the first
Well, didn't it just come
Atari.
out like 5 years ago? I don't know. Maybe
No,
No, no, no. Okay,
it,
we got
it
something.
might have been a reboot. Might have been a reboot,
Might have-
brother. But that's about it. But
well,
yeah, because now they got all the monsters, and we're no longer headbutting bricks to get a mushroom. But
there we go. But you just mentioned icon. While Mario is an icon, we have an icon of a guest today. So let's hit
yes.
that intro and get started, brother.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Yeah, you
That was
find
a
the
slick
segues.
volley. I didn't even realize it.
Hey man, I'm learning, man. I'm learning, man. Toastmasters and these improv classes are definitely helping, my man. So,
There you go,
like I
brother.
said,
There you go.
it's been helping, my man. But today is first and foremost, I want to thank Bill for this networking with Casey Jenkins, someone who is when I was doing research, Dan, and I'm not to talk about any other guests or anything like that because we love everybody who comes on the show, but I was just amazed at the experience and I want to say her respectability that she has for our amazing industry. Someone who started in the freight brokerage side and then kind of moved up on the shipper side and then worked in carrier side, drayage. There's not anything that Casey hasn't done, Dan. So, she has the lean Six Sigma black belt, which I've been looking into that. Have you taken a look into that at all, Dan? It's kind of like a training
No,
program where you have it, and it's not to do with
no.
karate, by the way.
And that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I had heard of it, but I immediately said, "Well, I got a black belt in Taekwondo. If that
Yeah,
matters, from
I'm pretty
like
sure
20
Casey's
years
black belt.
ago."
Yeah, her
Don't get me
black
wrong,
belt's definitely a lot better, but
I'm no Joe Rogan, that's for sure. But
that's awesome.
you
So
know,
we want to welcome Casey. She definitely is a great follow on LinkedIn for anybody who's aspiring. It doesn't matter which side of the logistics side you fall under. She does have 2-minute topic videos that she kind of does in 3 or 4 parts. This week she came out with supply chain planning, and as much as we can keep talking about her, we want to bring her on the show and let her have some fun. So welcome to Sales Chatter, Casey, as we're bringing her on here. How you doing?
Hello. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm happy.
oh, there we go. Now we're moving. And the camera's coming into focus, and we're good. You just froze there for a second, Casey.
Oh, no. Well, I'm happy
Yeah.
to be here. I'm unfrozen now. So,
Yes.
We're so happy to have you. And just when we did our pre-interview, like you're just somebody that I personally look up to. I think it's amazing with everything they kind of do. Let's get right into it. Can you tell us how did you get here? What's your journey like in logistics? I know you went to Penn State University on the dean's list, all those amazing things. But yeah, tell us about your journey.
yeah. So actually, I never really planned to get into supply chain. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a meteorologist. And so I actually went to undergrad and have a degree in weather as well. But I was about 5 years into basically a supply chain career, and finished up my weather degree and then was like, well, what's next? And I kind of realized like, maybe I need to learn more about this industry. Right. So, but started my freight career, I guess, in brokerage. And then got into that more cross-functional role where I started to see how all the pieces connect, that there's efficiencies to be made across all of it. That process is taking too long. Well, that one's moving too fast. Well, there's a bottleneck there, right? And went and got my master's in supply chain management, and then tried to make career moves that would allow me to touch on each aspect of supply chain. I've had people tell me, that, well, your experience is so broad, you're not like a specialty player, but really when it comes down to it, all of my experience and, career moves and education are to be a player and a star player at the more holistic level to oversee the entire supply chain. So I've been everywhere from, supply chain management on the shipper side, working with manufacturing, last mile distribution. I've done the drayage, transloading, trucking market, working with shippers, working with carriers, working with brokers. So I've just kind of done a little of everything, really. So
Interesting. I think Ryan might be frozen now too.
No, I would give it here, but
that
I
was
think
a very nice pause, buddy. That was a good
no, I
pause
want to
on
really
there.
take it in because, like she said, she's
That
worked
was
with everything.
stellar.
Yeah, it was awesome to kind of hear. And
Well,
Dan,
I start giggling because you go from a career where you get to lie every day and still keep your job in being a weather person, and then a career where back in the day it was all about not letting the customer know you were freaking out, so you're a duck above water
Right.
and below water, everything's going to hell, and you have to lie about it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty awesome. So you got this.
So,
Sorry,
well, like to kind of connect the two, really, because I get
Yeah.
that question all the time. Like what's the relationship there, right? And because they are very like different, but when you really stop to think about it, weather is a process, right? Supply chain is a process. They both face disruptions. They both face minimal changes that can change then the trajectory of everything else. So like when you really start to think of it, I just like processes, right? And I like to find the problems, with disruptions occurring and how to fix them. And the same thing can be said with weather. I will say though, it's not that they're lying. It is very hard to actually forecast when you don't control the atmosphere. I promise 100%.
See, they're always right when I have a golf game and they say it's going to rain. But when they say we're going to get 30 centimeters of snow and I plan my snowmobiling around it, it's always wrong. And, everyone could probably have the same thing where they have a family barbecue and it's always right when it's going to rain. But we had one last year with 90%, 95% chance of like 15 millimeters. And it was beautiful and sunny out all day. We canceled all these huge plans and it gurs you from the inside out. Yes,
Yeah.
I said "gur" on live on live social air.
Yeah, I might have to kick you out after that one. But I think Dan, you mentioned a great thing when we were talking about Casey yesterday. Can you get to your point, especially with what you kind of found and leading that discussion?
Yeah. So obviously Ryan and I were talking, and your perspective on let's just take the recent Bed Bath and Beyond Chapter 11. What that does to the logistics industry as a whole, large suppliers, small suppliers, and I've noticed ever since they put that out and filed, so many people post, oh, how much money are they going to leave on the streets and da-da-da. And it goes beyond that. And just when we were talking earlier, you made some really valid points. So if we can dive into that just a little bit, because it's not just one company and their lanes that disappear. There's a lot more involved in it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like, that's why companies really need to focus on, thinking on a holistic scale, right? Because something like this with Bed Bath and Beyond, it's not just impacting them and their employees, which is also, hard to deal with as well. A lot of people are going to be losing their jobs and, livelihoods, but it impacts all the businesses that they do work with. I mean, that's everywhere from, your suppliers, your manufacturers, your transportation providers, even the buildings that they're probably either renting or maybe own. Like it impacts everyone across the entire supply chain. And a lot of times, related to inventory specifically, it's some of these suppliers are, your small to medium-sized businesses, right? They're having to actually invest capital into producing product to fill the stores. And now what, right? Like they're not going to be able to get paid on the stuff that may be already in store, or maybe they've not gotten paid in months. Well, that could tank a business of that size, right? Because they're having to put that investment in on the front end to be able to get their product into the store expecting a return. And if there's not a return, then what do? You're at a loss. And I'm sure there's like insurance ways, I've not really read too much into detail with it. I'm sure there's ways insurance wise or some sort of contingency that will allow them to recoup maybe some loss. But like some of these suppliers and providers, this could actually probably hurt them financially, unfortunately.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially if, if you get 50 cents back on the dollar, but your
Right.
profit's only 10 cents on the dollar or 15
Right.
cents on the dollar, it's cost you 10 or 15 cents to give that product to that person.
Correct.
Right. It's not always as easy as, oh, well, it was just a driver and wages and a little bit towards truck rental or truck payments and stuff. Right. Like
Right.
there's a lot more hidden costs out there that get tied up. One thing that you said that was very, very interesting, when we're talking on the back, is when we started talking about, well, this doesn't happen overnight. There's signs, right? And you noticed it at a certain point, well before somebody had said something about a suit score. Sorry, about actually filing. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I think those early warning signs are something people have to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like you can kind of see when the ship's starting to get, steered off course, right? Like a ship just doesn't sink as soon as the hole is in it, right? Like it starts to, leak the water, you start to kind of see it go down, but you can see it go down. So one of the things that I've been kind of confused with this is how these big companies and how these, leaders and C-suites just watch it go down. I mean, because again, this isn't something that happens overnight. It doesn't even happen within a year, I wouldn't think. You're going to be able to see those warning signs of sales decreasing, costs inflating. I mean, was there no one in these organizations saying, hey, something's happening, right? I doubt it. Like, I'm sure there was. It's just, why wasn't any action taken, years ago? And I know this isn't the first time with them where this has been a concern. I mentioned this about David's Bridal the other day as well, when they announced, that they're headed towards bankruptcy too. It's like, this isn't their first rodeo with this. So why weren't changes made to be able to effectively like get out of this hole that they've dug? And that's where I'm just like confused. These massive organizations, they may not have the capital or the sales to support, these initiatives, but go get an investor and see if they'll fund an initiative to improve and create efficiencies to then recoup losses, right? I mean, there's ways I feel like to go about it that nowadays you've got more access to than, years ago, to be able to mitigate this before it actually happens. And I don't understand how it happens, quite frankly.
I agree. I'm puzzled as well. I mean, I know Bath and Body Works is a store my wife buys a ton of stuff like candles and soaps and everything from. And Ryan, I know your wife loves that store as well.
I love that store, by the way.
I'm
the one who's pushing for it, by the way. Those Sunday
okay.
errands to Marshall's, Bath and Body Works, they're all me. I make it seem like it's my wife, but it's all me.
But you'll know then during COVID, they didn't deliver for the first probably year.
Right.
Like you couldn't have order online.
Yeah, they didn't even have a website.
I know. And you got to think about that, right? Like, so how much did they lose? And how long is it going to take for them to recoup? Are they struggling on the back end? And nobody really knows, because like you said, it takes years for a company of that size to go bankrupt. Well, maybe not. I mean, it all depends. You triple your shipping costs, and then all these things start doing this, and before you realize it, you're in an off balance. But, to look at it and say, as a corporation, hey, we don't have a website. People can't buy our product. Our stores are filled every day, all day long. These people are no longer allowed in malls. We're missing out. Put up a website. Something as simple as that, where we consider simple. We can go to WordPress and have a website up in an hour. And you can't put it like a Shopify store together with all these really talented people on your payroll. To me, it's that being able to pivot and shift with the times. And I don't know if that's, and Casey, you're going to probably be way better at explaining this than Ryan and I, but is it red tape? Is it the layers in a major corporation like that, where somebody sees it as a benefit and other people are like, no, we're too big to, kind of like the housing crisis and Lehman and all this, that we're too big to go down kind of thing? Or what is the, like, in your opinion, what would be that initial kind of front line for these things to be blocked? Because Bed Bath and Beyond could have gone to online delivery to compete with Amazon and all these other things, and and it would have been an investment, but they'd still be here.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, like, honestly, some of it is, I don't think these companies know how to pivot. There is a lot of red tape that, in corporations, it's no secret that this stuff takes a lot of time, right? Like, to make a decision, it can take weeks to make a single decision. And I think that because of that, there is red tape. There is, who's responsible for what. There is the concept of, well, making change is hard. No one likes the change, right? No one likes to make changes. They also realize, like, with change does come, time, resources, and a monetary aspect, to be able to enforce the changes and maintain them. So I will say, like, some of those factors are at play, but that shouldn't limit companies from trying to make these shifts, right? And as we learned in COVID and, through that whole experience, we have to start making these shifts if we want to stay competitive. I've mentioned Amazon quite a few times. I've always admired Amazon's supply chain, and what they did years ago with kind of bursting onto the scene with, like, a completely new way of doing things, right? And it forced everyone to actually have to go, well, wait a second, we've got to adjust now or else we're going to lose business. And recently I saw Walmart is now competing with Amazon, and they're kind of playing this back and forth game of, like, who's on top. But if you see an organization like Walmart and how complex their supply chain is and how complex their operations are and all of the offerings that they have, being able to pivot their supply chain as fast as they have. I mean, you're talking in the last, maybe I'd say, like, 5 to 7 years, really, that they've completely shifted. Any organization can do it. I mean, there's really not an excuse, I don't think, and that's the thing. Like, if you're realizing that you're falling behind industry standards, it doesn't have to be a massive overhaul to even start with, right? Take a small step, create your website, right? Figure out how you're going to be able to, like, service in that manner. And I think some companies also think that to make change, they actually have to, like, completely revamp their entire company all at once. And that's not it. It is a kind of, I guess, step-by-step process. It is incremental change leads to a snowballing action. But you have to be able to take, the first step in making and improving on things to be able to then take it a step further and then a step further. And there has to be realistic timelines. I've seen integrated business plans or, these process or these changes that are like 15-year plan. And I'm like, 15 years? Like, are you kidding? Like, in 15 years, we're probably going to have something completely different that's going to be, impacting and changing. And then you're going to have to redo all of this. And it's going to be another 15 years, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, think short term, but also think long term. How does this short term strategy play into your long term gain? And I think that's a lot of it too, is these organizations have to start thinking, what is our strategy? What is our strategy for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And what steps are we going to be taking to actually get there in the short to achieve the long?
So cool.
Do you think companies can actually plan 10 or 15 years out at the speed at which everything's changing?
I would say with a directionally correct plan. So I use that term a lot. Okay.
That's a good
and
one.
So that someone actually gave me that career advice once, because, like, I used to be someone who would be so in the details with executing things and having, like, contingency A, B, C, D, and E, because that's just how I am, that when something like this would happen, then, like, a disruption would occur. I'd be like, okay, well, what plan can I, I'd be scrambling because I've got so many detailed options on the table that, well, that plan might not fit that to a T, or that plan might not fit that to a T. So someone told me, be directionally correct, have an overarching general idea of what you're trying to achieve and high level steps of how to get there. And then as things present themselves, you just kind of adapt. I don't want to say on the fly, but kind of adapt on the fly to assess the risk or assess the disruption in real time to then know how to pivot. And I think that's what companies would need to do with a strategy, is kind of sit there and go, all right, 10 years from now, well, we know we're headed in this direction, we're headed in that direction, and that direction. What's just a high level roadmap of what we're trying to achieve to get to those end goals, knowing that there is going to be changes in, technology or processes or, this, I guess, the landscape of supply chain, and being able to actually adapt those plans accordingly. I think it just needs to be directionally correct.
Yes. Okay. Love
That is
that.
awesome. This is awesome. This is an amazing conversation, Casey. You were amazing. I actually want to get to one thing that Bill actually mentioned here, that we'll switch topics a little bit here, but he just wanted to talk about, ask Casey about automating tasks that are admin or non-revenue generating, and he believes it's a great perspective. So all of us, we want to learn this great perspective. So hit us with it.
Awesome. Yeah. So obviously, digital transformation has been a hot buzzword here recently in the news. And, companies are looking at ways to integrate technology into their processes, their business plans, their strategies. And it's something that's desperately needed in this industry for sure. But, the topic of automation comes up, right? And I think the way companies need to approach automation is looking at the tasks that aren't customer facing as your first step to automation. Your redundant tasks, your tasks that your employees are having to enter into 9 different systems on a daily basis. The tasks that are just, I don't want to say meaningless, that's the wrong word, but the tasks that aren't really going to be value add from a customer facing perspective that can actually just be, automated. Anything in terms of, and I think when I spoke with Bill a couple weeks ago on this, anything that's going to be customer facing at this point, I personally feel like still requires the human element, mainly because in this day and age, relationships mean everything, right? And that's the biggest piece, is you don't want to lose the relationships between you and your clients, you and your providers, you and whoever in the industry, right? And it's one of those things where if you can automate I think Lisa actually had a comment here I'm seeing of the mundane and the backstage. That's a great way to put it. If you can automate those tasks, honestly, your resources when customer facing are going to be able to be value added, because they're going to have the time and the energy to actually put thought into their interactions with customers, versus I've got to enter this into 9 different systems when a system can actually do this for me, right? So I would say, that's my take on it. As companies are looking for ways to automate or input technology into their processes, it needs to be focused on, the customer and their needs first. And those more mundane tasks can be just automated on the back end.
Well, Dan, you can attest to this too, right? You look at something like as I'm a freight broker, the CRM. If I'm doing prospecting, I've got to make sure that I open up my CRM, call the customer. Hey, did I have a conversation? Put that in the CRM. Those are 2 minutes every single phone call. And let's say I make 30 phone calls a day. It just keeps adding up. Dan, what are your thoughts on some other tasks that you've seen over your sales career, being a coach and being a high performance logistics rep yourself?
Oh, same thing. The whole data entry into CRM. Listen, I know it's important because it allows management to, especially in the larger companies, if you're getting nowhere with a lead and somebody has an in, they can get in and blah, 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 and all of that. I actually see a lot of companies, and there was a huge push 15 years ago, probably, where automated phone systems came in. And every company wanted this automated phone system. And I remember the owner of the company I was working for, he goes, never. It'll always be a human being answering our phones. And at first I was like, wow, that's crazy. And now when I get an automation, when I make a phone call and it's like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So how many times you push 0 before you get a human? It's like, I just want a human so I can speak to. But as a corporation, it was like, well, it'll be easier. An answering machine will answer. They'll ask them for an extension to go, and then we can save a salary. But you're right. That's front facing. That's not behind the scenes. Behind the scenes automation would be great. I call it automate, delegate, and delete. Automate it, delegate it, or delete it if it's mundane. And I don't know. I think some companies choose the wrong areas to try and automate, personally. I mean, wouldn't it be great if you can call the government and get a human being within 30 seconds?
Oh, God.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Well, they're on strike
really?
right now, Dan. In Canada,
Yeah.
they're on strike, so
Okay,
you can't get anybody.
But wouldn't it? Like, how long do you wait on hold? Like, how much of our day is spent on hold for usually for personal things? But Ryan, you make a point. If it takes you 2 minutes to enter notes every time you make a phone call, if it takes you an extra 2 minutes to figure out where that objective is in this call or in this email that you're going to do, what you're going to send, you got to think about that, right? Half an hour a day is 2.5 weeks of productivity at the end of the year. Half hour a day is 2.5 weeks. So you lose literally over half a month of productivity. I think it's absolutely asinine that we lose this much time. And that's just one task. Then you start going, the 4 or 5 different tasks that are mundane in our daily life. You lose yourself almost 2 months of productivity. That, I think, is just crazy when you start adding up the numbers.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, all of those tasks, and especially because it's part of the problem is that there's so many different systems that, people are working with on a daily basis. And if you have to enter one thing after each call or after each transaction into one system, you're probably having to enter it into multiple systems as well, because they don't talk to each other. So that's the thing. If those processes can be automated to where then your resources are actually focused on the value add services, then one, you're already saving money in that regard, right? Yeah, it might be a little money upfront or capital to be able to make those changes, but you're going to recoup it because you'll start to realize that your processes are way more efficient too when you allow the technology to actually work for you versus trying to just automate everything, right? And that's where I go back to the whole concept of it has to be an incremental change. Look at currently what processes internally and externally, because that is important, of where you can add technology to make improvements and automate those mundane tasks. And then from there, maybe your next step is then automating full things like warehouse processes or, pick, pack, shipping, things like that. But start with the more mundane, and you're going to realize that your costs have reduced quite a bit just from that alone, plus your efficiency, and then also your agility because your data is flowing better. So it's just starting with this, the first steps and the smaller steps to then get to the point of complete robot domination, I guess. I don't know.
I remember having a conversation with a customer, and it was one of many that I've had with customers over the years. And he was just so frustrated. And it was like 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. I'm like, what's going on? Like, he was just very, very snip and very, very abrupt. So what's going on? He goes, takes me 4 hours to get the information from our reports for Tuesday's meetings. I said, 4 hours? He goes, yeah, we have 4 different systems, and I have to cross-check each system because none of them talks to each other. And it was amazing because after about 10 minutes, we realized that I had a system that was able to give him the information in about 10 seconds. And it changed what he did. Like, he was able to go and pick his kids up from school after work and like all these different things because his company spent so much. They were $1 billion corporation, over $1 billion corporation. And they had 4 systems that did not talk to each other because they did not put any value on that side of the business. They put value on how we're going to get cheap warehouse space, how are we going to ship things properly. But it's like one warehouse system doesn't talk to the customer management system, doesn't talk to the accounting system, doesn't like none of them speak. And it was probably my first time realizing how far companies need to come
Yes.
to get into it. And maybe it was just because I was in logistics and the whole system was like everything was in one, accounting, reporting, everything, and probably not as many moving parts in brokerage as it is in a company of his size. But I would have thought the first thing would be systems speaking to each other. So you can accrue for OS&D easily. You can, you know what your inventory is, so you know what your cost per square inch or per square foot of your warehouse is when it's full, when it's not full, what's coming in, cross check that in like 2 seconds flat with inventory, and maybe you have to divert it to the West Coast instead of the East Coast. Instead, they were getting shipments into their dock, realizing they had like 100 units of it and they're selling 10 units a month. So then they'd order a B train at like $16,000, throw the stuff on that and send it out west. And I'm like, you're increasing your logistics budget by hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because you're not being proactive. I just don't. I mean, I think that's why Amazon did what they did, right? From selling books to being who they are today, it was all about the process.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the whole being proactive versus reactive. I think a lot of companies in years past being reactive worked, right? It worked. It was fine. But as times have changed, you can't be like that anymore. You really can't. And that's the thing. It's like coming out of the pandemic and realizing like, look, we can't react to things anymore because of the fact that we've got to have time to be able to make these decisions, right? And that was part of it of having to speed up some of this stuff, is because of the fact that it was taking too long to figure out decisions, to react, right? And then by the time you've reacted, something else has happened that you're then having to go back and react to as well. So it's one of those things where it's like, I hate to say it, like the pandemic was like, I feel like it was beneficial for the supply chain industry to open up our eyes and realize change needed to be made, right? Change needed to be made. We needed to start kind of thinking differently. We needed to think more holistically, cross-functionally. We can't have the silos anymore. Technology has to be used to be able to get better data flow and to get processes improved. And, if you're not going to jump on board, you're just going to fall behind and you'll end up not keeping up with the rest of the world, basically, because that's where it's all headed. And that's the thing. It's like, you can see where it's headed. If you're just preaching the buzzwords and you're not taking action, once you get to where it's headed, you're going to be the one falling behind. And we'll be talking about you on a podcast about how you should have seen this coming, quite frankly. So
I love that.
Ain't that the truth?
That is like our mic drop right there by Casey. That was awesome. And what I got from that is like, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And you always have to kind of be ahead of the curve and look at that from there. Casey, this has been such an amazing time. I hate when time runs out like this, because like I feel like we can go on forever. Like there's so many value that everybody got in the comments. But let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. Tell them a little bit about 2 Minute Topics, and as well as 828 Consulting.
Yeah, so I do a weekly video called 2 Minute Topics. And basically the goal for it is to just kind of strike conversation. It's supposed to give you a 2 minute, well, 2 to 3 minute, depending on the topic, 2 to 3 minute, just high level overview of what the topic is, and get you to think differently, get you to kind of start talking about these things. And a few little tips are thrown in there. They are all on LinkedIn. I do have them on YouTube as well, just as a reference point for if you need all the videos, but you can definitely get a hold of me via LinkedIn. Please make sure to connect with me or send me a message. I'm always happy to meet with folks and chat supply chain. And then, yes, I do own a consulting business called 828 Consulting. And I do consulting. But it's an executional style. I'm someone who I'm able to walk into an organization, identify the problems, and then also execute on how to fix them, come up with your plans, find providers, everything like that. I don't have to go back to 90 people on the team to do an analysis. I can run your analysis, right? So it is an executional style that I take with that business. But yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out for any consulting, let me know, because I am taking clients and contracts. So always happy to do business with folks.
That That is amazing. So everybody definitely hit her up. And the one thing that I'm a sucker for volunteer work. That's something that Dan and we both do as well. And to see that you're a big supporter of the America's second harvest of coastal Georgia. And when we had our pre-interview, you did mention that you like to give back to the community and invest in the community. And that's a big thing that I think is so remarkable. And shout out to Enzo and Skye. I know they're in the back there, but we're hoping that they would have made a little appearance today. But Dan, final thoughts before we take this bad boy home?
You know what? Final thoughts are you're absolutely amazing. I think the entire perspective of thinking of a supply chain holistically, if you're in logistics, if you're serving customers, if you're not thinking of their supply chain holistically, you're actually missing out on something huge. Because if they're not thinking of it and you think of it, you've just become a resource.
Yep.
And you definitely see that. You definitely see that. So if you did find value in this, please like, comment, share it with your friend, your neighbor, your spouse, and the most important one that we kind of talked about today, with the Amazon driver who's bringing you your packages today, because we all know that you placed an order last night on Amazon Prime. I myself am waiting for some packages, and we'll hit the replay again at 2 and 6 p.m. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And tomorrow is Data Day. We got Dean Croak, the principal analysis of DAT, Freight and Analytics, and then we have the cowboy himself, the bodacious cowboy, Jeff Dickinson, joining us. With us, it's going to be a fun fact, all data. We're talking about produce, and hey, maybe we'll take some of these topics that we talked about today to kind of hear it from a data point of view. So with that being said, everybody have an amazing day. Share this. And like we said, connect with Casey because she is awesome. I know I'm going to be looking forward to those two mega topics, especially on supply chain planning. So take care, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.